All right, so Jordan Peterson, the intellectual, philosophical giant of the right, cannot stop crying. So we've had a couple different videos that have come out over the last couple of years of him breaking down and getting emotional. Now, at a surface level, obviously I don't have any problem with that. Sometimes you're emotional and you get caught up talking about some political issue that you're passionate about. That's entirely fine. But as you're going to see in this interview that he was doing with the Hoover Institution, which is a right-wing conservative think tank, he is breaking down and crying and getting emotional, pissing and shitting his pants over completely ridiculous lines of reasoning. So let's go ahead and watch this clip, and then I will give you guys my thoughts on it.
Incoming freshmen next year, University of Toronto, Stanford University, 18-year-old kids coming into this. We've been through 3 years of COVID. I won't rehearse it all. One sentence. What would you say to them as they begin university at the age of 18 or 19? What's the restorative, the redemptive sentence? What should they do?
Don't be thinking your ambition is corrupt. You know, because that's part of the message now. Human beings, we're a cancer on the planet. We're headed for an environmental apocalypse. The entire historical structure is nothing but atrocity, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone with any ethical aim whatsoever is just going to pull back. You don't want to manifest any ambition, support the patriarchal structure, exploit the environment. You've got to crush yourself down. You shouldn't even have any children. It's like, no. There's no excuse for that. There's zero excuse for that. I saw a professor at an event, something like this. He came out and trumpeted this bloody, environmentally friendly house he built. And, you know, fair enough, man. It was a pretty interesting house. But not everybody had the $4 million that it took him to build it. And I'm not criticizing his money even. It's like, he's had some money. Good for him. He built a house. Okay. But then to trumpet that as a moral virtue, well, you're pushing it there. And then he came out to all the kids and he said, you know, my wife and I decided that we were only going to have one child. And I think that's one of the most ethical things we could have possibly done. And I would strongly encourage you to do the same. I thought, you son of a bitch. You get up in front of these young people. A lot of these kids were children of first-generation immigrants from China. And he showed all these images, you know, of these terrible factories in China, these endless rows of sterile mechanism that were subordinating all the Chinese people to this terrible, you know, capitalist machine. And I thought, you don't understand. Half the audience is looking at those factories and thinking, that's a hell of a lot better than struggling through the mud under Mao, buddy. And so I don't know where he thought he was, but to come out in front of all those kids and basically tell them that the whole human enterprise is so goddamn corrupt that the best thing they could possibly do is limit their multiplication, and to think of himself as a scholar and an educator was just, I did say something, by the way. It was rather uncomfortable, and he stomped off the stage. But that's no message for young people. There's no excuse for that. And you think, well, you know, we're going to destroy the planet. We have to do this. We have to demoralize the youth to be ethical. It's like, yeah, really, that's your theory? You're going to demoralize young people to be ethical? That's your theory? It's like, you should go home and think about that for like a year. And I'm passionate about this, you know, because you have no idea how many people that's killing. You have no idea. I see people everywhere, all over the world. They're so demoralized, especially young people with a conscience, because they've been told since they were little that there's nothing to them but corruption and power. It's like, how the hell do you expect them to react? You know, well, I shouldn't do anything, man, you know.
Dr. Jordan Peterson on what was the phrase? The divine sovereign
individual.
The divine sovereign individual.
Okay, so there's a lot going on there. First of all, you know, again, I don't have a problem with people being emotional when they get passionate about political issues, but dude is clearly unstable, okay, for a number of different reasons. He's obviously had his own personal dealings with, you know, drug use and all of this other shit that he's been through, but dude is clearly not stable, first of all. Second of all, there's a lot of different arguments that he was just floating out there, and he was conflating so many different, you know, arguments that were put forward by this random specific professor that he's talking about that I don't really know anything about, and he's conflating like anti-reproduction arguments or people who are saying you shouldn't reproduce because, you know, the world is going in a catastrophic direction, and so you have a responsibility to, you know, not increase the population of the world. I think that's a terrible argument, but it's not an argument that the majority of leftists or majority of what he would consider to be the radical Marxist left that's taking over the country, nobody is making those arguments. Nobody's saying you shouldn't go have kids because of climate change. People are recognizing the threat of climate change, as he was talking about there, and they're making calculations in their own head about what's maybe reasonable for themselves on a personal level, but nobody's making an anti-growth argument from what I've seen on the left as a whole. So the main thing that he's saying there is what? He's basically saying We have a problem of demoralization, especially within young people, okay? That's 100% true, but why are young people demoralized right now given the current political state of the world? Well, Jordan Peterson wants you to believe that the reason why young people are demoralized and that they're throwing their hands up in some instances and giving up on life is because they're being told about how shitty the world is, or because they're learning about the history of the world and all of the fucked up things that have happened, and so therefore they're going to turn around, throw their hands up, and they're not going to have any ambition because they're not going to want to feed into these systems of patriarchy and capitalism and whatever the fuck, and that's the reason why they're being demoralized. He has it completely backwards. I mean, I don't know how you would come to this conclusion without thinking about it for more than 2 seconds, but the reason why young people are demoralized isn't because they're being told about the shitty state of the world. The reason why young people are demoralized is because of the shitty state of the world and the fact that we have institutions at a global level, at a federal level with the US government that are not doing anything to address the problems that young people are worrying about right now. That's why young people have been demoralized. I can give you just a couple examples here. So just recently on May 4th, I guess, and I guess this is kind of according to the way we've been adjusting the way that we count the COVID deaths and stuff. So I think that this is a little bit late to when we actually hit this mark, but just a couple days ago, apparently the US officially reached an unfathomable number, 1 million deaths from COVID. Okay, so just one instance as to why people may be demoralized. We've just gone through this multiple year pandemic. We're still going through it. We have the government that's coming out right now. Just the other day, the CDC was coming out and saying they're projecting that 1/3 of the American people, like 100 million Americans, could get COVID in the fall. We've had 1 million COVID deaths. We've had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are going to have long-term illnesses from this, who have lost family members from this, and the government has not been doing fucking anything about it. I mean, even the Joe Biden administration that ran against the Trump administration, which was catastrophic in their handling of COVID, the Biden administration steps in. He runs his platform on, we're going to be the party that gets COVID under control. Well, there's some things you could commend him for. Vaccination rates went up when he took office, but at the end of the day, they ended up making economic decisions that were prioritizing getting people back into the workplace at the expense of actually protecting people from COVID. So, this is a type of shit that could demoralize people, as you see our government basically saying mass death is acceptable when there were periods where we were having 1,000, 2,000 deaths a day, and that was just considered the normal. I mean, this is the type of shit that demoralizes young people when you see a government that is prioritizing the interests of capitalists against the interests of average working class people and against the interests of any humanitarian values. But another example here, just in the last couple of weeks, we had that leaked draft document that came down from the Supreme Court indicating that they're going to be overturning Roe v. Wade, a 50-year super precedent that the American people have literally for the entirety since this ruling have agreed that it should stay in place. And now we have an extremist right-wing reactionary court that was put in place by Republicans who largely didn't win the popular vote, by Republicans who put them there for explicitly political reasons, largely backed by bullshit religious justifications. And now they're going to be taking away civil liberties and rights from millions and millions of women across this country, putting their health and safety in jeopardy. And you have this reactionary court that is doing something that's widely unpopular, and nothing is being done to prevent this from happening. Democrats aren't doing anything substantial to push through protecting Roe v. Wade at the federal level by getting rid of the filibuster. Joe Biden's not even necessarily in favor of that. They're coming out and telling everybody just show up and vote in 2022 as if that's going to change the situation regarding the filibuster and Roe v. Wade. So you're getting rid of fundamental rights that have been enshrined in this country for decades. This is, again, just one instance of something that could potentially demoralize young people and believe that our institutions are failing them. Not that, this idea of individualism, as Jordan Peterson likes to, center all of his commentary around. He wants you to believe that it's all up to the individual. If you just get up and you clean your room, then society will magically fix itself if everybody engages in that type of behavior. While he basically is making that argument to distract from the fact that it's institutional failures. These institutions that are failing on COVID, that are failing on reproductive rights, these institutions need to be confronted. They need to be undone. And so learning about these things, learning about the fucked up nature of how the world is operating and how this country is operating is part of that process in collectively mobilizing people in order to do that, in order to confront these institutions and dismantle ones that are not serving the overwhelming majority of the country, who are not serving young people, especially considering the specifics of the climate change thing that he was referencing there. there, and we'll get to that here in a second. But just one more example here from Time. We had this study that came out a while ago where they basically said the top 1% of Americans have taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90% since like roughly the Reagan administration. So again, these are the types of things that demoralize people. When you have a complete detachment of productivity and wages, when the minimum wage, for example, at $7.25 an hour is blocked by the fucking Senate parliamentarian and Kirsten Sinema who did her cutesy little thumbs down, when you have wages that are stagnant, you have currently inflation that is rising, and you have a government that is not only failing to materially improve the lives of working class people and young people, but is actively, bailing out corporations, shoveling out billions and billions of dollars to protect the interests, once again, of capital against the interests of the overwhelming majority of working class Americans and working people across the world. So again, just one other instance of something that could legitimately be demoralizing to witness this type of thing happening as our government and our institutions, our structures within society continue to perpetuate this type of shit. I mean, again, that's why people are being demoralized. It's not because they're learning about this, it's because this is taking place. But finally, just one example here on the specifics of climate change, which is something that he was talking about there. We had this that came out from the United Nations. They say the UN warns the Earth is firmly on track towards an unlivable world. Wow, I wonder if that might be demoralizing for young people to witness something like this happening, as again, our entire government, even under a Democratic president, a Democratic-controlled House, a Democratic-controlled Senate, is basically letting a single millionaire coal baron named Joe Manchin completely tank the possibility of addressing climate change in a meaningful way. These are the types of things that demoralize young people, okay? It's not the fact that they're learning about this. It's not the fact that this, that they're basically learning about this and learning about the corruption within our government institutions. It's because this is happening and because nothing is being done about it. But if you go back to Jordan Peterson and what his take is on this and why he's crying about all this, he's basically trying to get you to focus on the individual, to not confront all of these broken institutions that are not serving young people, that are not serving working class Americans. He doesn't want you to confront those institutions because he is serving those institutions. That's exactly what his entire moral philosophy is structured around, and that's evident by the fact that he's doing this interview in the first place at the Hoover Institution, a conservative, libertarian-minded institution that wants less government, that wants to reduce the capacity of the government to actually, in a democratic way, address any of these different issues. So when it comes down to it, his entire philosophy is just based on this cult of individualism, that there's no possible way to confront or to fix societal structures or institutions that are not serving the American people. There's no way to do that unless you first clean up your room, metaphorically or literally, depending on the advice that he's giving in any given moment, and clean up your room, set your house in order, and perfect yourself as an individual. There's other than doing that, there's no way to confront the problems that we are facing as a society. So ironically, at the end of the day, his ideology is one that perpetuates the conditions necessary for young people to be demoralized in the ways that he's talking about in this video.